Hello, everyone. Today is another snowy day in New York, but it's warm inside at the virtual breakfast sessions. Oh, today we have a great group to talk about SOPs, the most misunderstood manual you have in that shelf underneath the magazine that says New York Yankees win the World Series. Before we get going, I got to thank the guy who's paying the bills, Ed Flanagan and the Era Group. Listen, I've been preaching this for years now. Listen, if you work very, very hard for your money, and like I say always, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And if you think you're getting skimmed by your distributors, they're making mistakes, whether it be on purpose or by accident, call Ed Flanagan and the Era Group. Their people will sift through your invoices, sift through your contracts, and make sure you're getting exactly what you're paying for. And if they think there's a better route for you, they will make suggestions. All right, back to our show. But before we go into the show, let's introduce ourselves. Jay, say hi to the folks.
Hello, everyone out there. Jay Bandy with Goliath Consulting Group. We're a consultancy based in Atlanta, Georgia. We focus on the restaurant business, everything from independent restaurants to international chains. We do everything also from ground up restaurant development to working with existing brands on operations, marketing, branding, and financial success.
All right, thank you. Richard, say hi.
Good morning. My name is Richard Weil, and our company is called National Restaurant Consultants. We are based in Denver, Colorado, and work throughout the country. We work primarily with independent and regional food service operators in all aspects of the food service and hospitality industry. Our primary goals and components is to make sure that we're meeting and exceeding the expectations of our clients' business needs, and we focus heavily as in terms of what can we create in terms of positive outcomes.
Okay. Charles.
Good morning. Charles Dorn from the Dorn Group, based in New York. Primarily work within the private club sector and do food and beverage, a lot of food and beverage consulting, executive search, and governance work within the private club sectors.
Okay. Say hi, Fred.
Morning, Fred Clashman, editor and publisher of Total Food Service.
Okay. So, SOPs. What is
Jana.
an SOP?
You didn't introduce Jana.
I know. Jana's sitting in the audience. Okay. We'll edit that out. All right. Okay. Back to the show. No more interruptions, please, Charles. Okay. Back to the show. Listen, SOPs. SOPs are an interesting manual. Very could be the most important manual in your shelf. But unless you do something about it or know what it is or where it is, it's not going to do anything. Richard, why don't you start and tell the people what is an SOP and why it's so important?
Well, it's certainly an acronym, standard operating procedures, if you would. SOPs have been used and kicked around in industries, not just the food service and hospitality industry, but multiples of industries, professions, service industry primarily. The components of an SOP is certainly to reflect around what is it that you expect, knowing people, listing what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to get it done, and most importantly, making sure that they can tell you that they can get it done. It's the devil's in the details, and it surrounds really what you're wanting to see happen and how it needs to happen. It's the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And again, it is documenting, putting it down on paper, but not just sitting on a shelf, but something that people, living, breathing documents that people can understand. Again, do they know what to do? Do they know how to do it? And most importantly, can they give you the receipt back in terms of saying that I can get this done? I can do this. I know how to do this. And it's imperative today that you've got these standard processes because it will make sure that you're doing the right things to meet and exceed the guest expectations. But as important as that, it will help you stay out of regulatory trouble. So it's a document that you can refer back to, that you've trained, and that people have understood what it is that you're trying to do in terms of your culture, in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. So that's in a maybe a 5,000-foot level, what an SOP is.
Okay, but Charles, I'm an owner. I've got my business here. I'm doing 90 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour. I got all that in my head. I tell my people what I want them to do. Why isn't that good enough?
Well, first of all, from the simple perspective of the labor market is not what it once was. We all deal with different employees at different levels. We deal with changing employees more than we would like. So the fact that you as the owner have it in your head will not often translate to employees' abilities. I think that there's a number of ways to look at SOPs. SOPs will give the employees their information to do it consistently. It will give the guest a consistent product. And every SOP actually has an economic benefit, or an economic standard, I should say, whether it be how we set a table to how we cut carrots in the kitchen. And I know that's going down into a lot of detail, but every one of those has an economic ramification. So I think that the boss may know right, but the boss doesn't always do it.
Okay, and so Jay, how often should one of these SOPs be updated?
SOPs should be updated as policies change within the restaurant. So if you have a new gift card policy that you need to write because the way you handle gift cards and the rewards, for example, has changed. So that would be an update of that SOP, get it out to all staff that's involved with guest interaction, and go through and explain that the SOP's been updated, what the changes in the SOP are, and then have them sign off on that policy change. So, it's something as
Repeat that
simple as,
last part. Repeat that last part
yeah,
about
and
signing off.
documentation, have to sign off. And so that way, that's a CYA. When the employee goes to the guest and still gives away points and takes the points and uses on their account, and they've signed the SOP, when you go to court, because the employee's going to sue you, you can go, this employee knew what it was. They signed the policy, they broke the policy, and that's it. But if you don't have that, and I'm talking through experience I have, almost every month somebody tries to get around loyalty programs. So, that's why you have SOPs. A number of things, to inform your staff, keep them updated. And then when things get legal, you have documentation.
So, Charles, is there 5 main points, 10 main points? How many points should be covered in an SOP?
Wow, we could probably do an entire session on that. I think it depends on the SOP itself. I mean, on one hand, we want, from an employee perspective, as Jay said, there's some Richard said it as well. There's legal ramifications that we want to make sure we have covered. But the reality is, what does it take to complete the action that we want? And so in some cases, SOPs are very simple about being prepared, being ready. In other cases, they're heat of the moment type things. And so I don't think there's an easy answer to that one, Larry.
All right. So if you have 3 sections, you have the front of the house staff, the back of the house staff in general. You got to cover everything from cooks to the cleanup crew. What happens? Well, I'm just. It's not only writing it. Am I right? You have to give classes on this so that you make sure that people know and B, don't forget. What is the general procedure with an SOP in training?
Well, it kind of goes to Jay's point. You change them as often as they need to be changed. And then when you're going to implement the change or implement a new SOP for whatever reason, the employees need to be trained on it. Training does not mean we hand it to them and say, go read it and start doing it, because first of all, in this day and age, English is not obviously always the first language of most of your employees. So it needs to be translated into different languages if necessary. Often we have people who can't read. I mean, there's got to be lots of different ways to distribute it. But the reality is also they need to see it, practice it, understand it. I think there's a significant difference between training and education. In lots of cases, we educate people simply because it's a task. So this is going to sound like a silly example, but think about something as simple as setting a table. That's training. We want the flatware an inch from the bottom of the table. We want the bottom of the base plate an inch from the bottom of the table. There's no education involved in that. That's training. That's a standard that we've decided. But then we get into something as simple or something as complex, I should say, as how do we receive? How do we receive the food that's coming into the kitchen? Again, we need to walk through it. We need to walk through it constantly. We need to spot check it, and to check it on an ongoing basis, because frankly, it's easy for any of us consultants to walk in and look at an invoice and see if things have been counted properly, or if the receiving clerk is swamped in the morning and every single thing is just, there's no changes to it. Chances are he or she has not done their job to actually look at the various product, to count the product, et cetera. So it's spot checking on a regular basis as well. No different than training a dining room staff. SOPs need to be an ongoing part of your training education program.
Right. So, Jay, what do you recommend people if they're breaking it down piece by piece when they're doing their daily training? A lot of restaurants, most restaurants have a daily meeting. A reminder in point, 9A. How often do you recommend that the restaurant owners go over these points to make sure that it is it goes into people's memory?
So with lineups, hopefully you've got a schedule and a plan for the week. So that kind of starts it for me. And then, as the restaurant manager, restaurant owner, what are the priorities, right? And so there shouldn't be more than one or two SOPs that are discussed during the week. You've got to hit all the staff. You've got to be able to spend time, and you've got to be able to focus. For example, new SOP this week, we're going to put checks at the bar in a bar glass in front of our guest. So we're going to talk about that all week because it affects a lot of people, the bartenders, but also the managers all need to be aware of that. And so something like that, that's probably all you're going to put up that week. Sounds crazy, but on the execution side of getting people to understand, to sign off, and to get through your staff, that's one in a week, right? And then you've got other things that you're going to talk about lineup. You've got daily specials, you're going to go through guest reviews, et cetera. So I think it's important that you don't overwhelm your staff, especially if you're up and operating with very many messages. You want to get one message, you want to execute, move to the next message.
Okay. What about an SD part of your SOP that tells everybody how much each steak should weigh? Now, here's an SOP that can actually either cost you money or cost you diners. When two people order steaks and one is giant, one's little. How do you go over that with the chef who already knows everything?
I think that's that's a bigger coaching, that's outside the SOP, right? The SOP is written. Here's how you cut a tenderloin. Here's how you skin it. Here's what you do with the trim, et cetera, right? So that's your recipe. That's your prep recipe, which, you can call your SOP. But you always have a bigger problem between the SOP and execution. The chef knows better. Chef doesn't need, to watch the person that's your meat person that's trimming that, right? Or cutting that fillet. So that's the gap, right? Because SOPs are great. SOPs are clear. That's the way you write them. it's easy to understand what the end result should be from that SOP, but the difference is you put people in the mix, people interpret, people have the ways they want to do things. And again, falls back, that's why you have an SOP, but coaching and training are critical for execution of an SOP.
Right. So, Richard, so you got a problem here with the SOP. You've written that a steak should be 14 ounces, and they're coming out 16. So you deliver 7 steaks and you've lost one. You deliver. How do you use the SOP and your training to bring it back to level?
Well, part of that is you inspect what you expect, of course. I mean, that's critical, is to manage the actual execution versus the SOP. I mean, you can't just hand it out, as Charles said, or uh, and just expect that's going to happen, or what Jay mentioned. I mean, you've got to inspect what you expect, and you got to hold people accountable. Those are one-on-ones. You praise in public and you punish in private, and those are the conversations you have with people on a side to make sure that if it's 14 ounces, that it's spot checks. The same thing on a bar. It's if you're free pouring and you do the pour test. It's 1.5 ounces or 1 3/4. Charles is in South Carolina. I mean, heck, you can't pour over 1.5. It's illegal. And so you've got to make sure that you've got compliance. I mean, that it is important. I like what Charles said earlier. SOPs have to tie back to a financial component. And if people understand that there's a financial component involved in terms of what it means to the operation, but more importantly, consistency, creating the consistency. That's what an SOP is about, creating the quality and consistency so that the guest expectations, as I mentioned early on, are met exceedingly every time. And I think that's so much of a critical component of inspecting what you expect, holding people accountable, having those one-on-one conversations, and the training and the coaching. They are two different things: education, coaching, whatever word you want to use. It's the one-on-one component. It's leading by example. If it's the executive chef that's not holding it at 16 or 14 or whatever it is, I mean, we all know that the number one place in a restaurant or an operation is the bar, that you get yourself in trouble because you got front-facing people that might have friends. I always have those hysterical moments as to familiarity, and so it is inspecting what you expect and holding people accountable.
Okay, so we've bordered on talking about keeping away from disaster. Somebody tell me a disaster that happened that was saved by an SOP.
Disaster that happened that was saved by an
Yeah,
SOP.
somebody did something, went offline. All of a sudden you're on the hook, and the person who made the mistake. How do you call them to that mistake?
Well, one of the things that I do a lot of is life, health, safety. In life, health, safety to me is where you prevent yourself from having those disasters, and documenting those components so that you don't have those disaster of life, health, safety. That's getting the caution wet floor signs out. That's making sure that guests see a step, whether it's going in and out of a booth or if it's going in and out of a dining room, up the stairs, and making sure the host or hostess understands those components, making sure that the end of the night you're getting the burners turned and that you're properly making sure that the pilots are lit. Those are SOPs that will avoid a standard operating procedure to keep you from having a disaster. Those, to me, life, health, safety, those SOPs tie right back into making sure you can avoid that. Unfortunately, I've dealt with avoidable situations with clients of mine who've had fires. I've had 3 clients in the last few years that have had fires. Fortunately, we did not have any casualties or fatalities, but SOPs could have prevented some of those things from occurring, and some of these fires were just avoidable. So, those to me are disasters. Slips and falls are disasters. Guests choking and not understanding how to handle those certain things in terms of Heimlich, or things that you've trained, things that you've created SOPs, contacting 911, et cetera. Those are SOPs that have to be managed in terms of avoiding some of those disasters. Excuse me.
Don't joke. Don't joke.
That's health
We don't
safety.
have an SOP to handle that. Fred, you're very quiet today.
I'm listening.
Okay.
I want to
Okay.
hear what Xana has to say. I haven't heard
All
from
right.
her.
Yeah. Now you could unmute Zana. Jana, unmute.
Xana.
Jana.
Good morning, everybody.
So
I love this conversation.
if you're going to summarize what you've heard so far.
Yeah, so I feel like in general, what I heard is very good communication. Let it be in person, let it be on a piece of paper, let it be really in our lineups and our staff meetings. I feel like the overall umbrella is definitely clear communication and making people understand what is really on the line, but not just telling them this is what we need to do, this is what we have to do, but here's also why. I'm a big friend of why. And I always love to explain why we're doing certain things. And the world of hospitality always has a reason why we do certain things. Why do we have salt and pepper in the middle of the table and why we remove it at the end before dessert comes? There's always a why. And same with SOPs. I think it's very imperative that we have everything as best as we can written down, signed off, 1,000 times explained again. And I'm so sorry, I'm learning everybody's name, but somebody said in the lineup to repeat that and only go with that week. And I think I want to say it was Mr. Richard. I think. Sorry, I'm still learning the names. But I completely agree with that.
It was Jay.
Oh, it was Mr. J. I'm sorry. My bad. And I completely agree with that because sometimes it's very overwhelming for staff to really take in what we have to say. And we have so much to say. And I think it's really important that we also understand that not everybody has the same learning curve and that we have respect for others that, they need to hear it again and again and again. And that's fine too. But start with the most imperative stuff. But I'm a friend of writing it all down and having it all set in stone. I'm a huge fan of that.
Right. So if I get everything correct, what I've heard so far is that you have to find your SOP where it is. You then have to update your SOP and keep it updated as things happen. We know that the world of the restaurant changed in 2020 and has been changing at a fever pitch ever since then. So you have to, and it's good to have it and give everybody a copy, but it's even better to have them read it, which means your SOP has got to be in at least 2 languages. Because you can't imagine that the guy who's washing your dishes is speaking English and will understand the complicated instructions that you're giving on the SOP. So everybody has to be taught in a language that they know, and it has to be drummed into their head. Vince Lombardi was a huge about training, and look what his teams did. It's how do you get to Carnegie Hall? You practice. This is what you have to do in your meetings, your daily meetings. Go over a point, see where the weaknesses fell this week, and bring it back to the SOP, and have regular meetings on that all the time. Anything to add to that, guys?
Well, I think there is one minor point that we haven't mentioned that's not so minor, which is that you can't write an SOP in a vacuum. If you're going to write an SOP, we discussed the issue of the chef a few moments ago. If you're going to say, as the owner, I want a steak 14 ounces, you're going to want to talk to the chef first, because what you don't know is how many times the chef gets asked for a bigger or a smaller steak. So you may find that the chef is often cutting a 12-ounce steak, because that's what the guests want. Or if you do an SOP that involves employees, I mean, Yana mentioned the idea of salt and pepper on the table, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't disagree, by the way, but perhaps the servers have a reason why they've done it the way they've done it, which may be valid, may not be valid. But if you hand a piece of paper to someone, or hand a new SOP, I should say, to someone, and they haven't had the opportunity to comment on it, it's going to be harder to implement than if you ask for feedback first. Feedback may be simple, like, oh yeah, we get it. That makes all the sense in the world. And then it's over and they're buying into it. But if you don't allow them to buy into it at the beginning and allow them to have some feedback and voice some thoughts, it's going to be harder to implement, just human nature.
Okay, so don't imagine that people working at a diner are going to do the same thing as Le Bernardin. You have to.
I don't think that's true at all. I completely disagree. I mean, when it comes to culture, that word culture, and it comes to attitude, and whether somebody's being put into a punitive and penalized type of scenario versus being part of something, I don't think it matters whether you work in a phone booth or you work at an airport. I mean, it's the same thing. It's people.
Yeah, I guess in the basics, you're right, but you still get that. What you're doing, Le Bernardin is paying for that extra service. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, the basics are the basics. You don't throw the food on the table. You speak to the people. You look at them. You talk to them. These are all basics. That you're 100% right, Fred. But there is something that Molly at the diner is not going to give the same thing as a waiter who's making upteen dollars.
You ever get on a bus and the bus driver says good morning, and you could tell they love their job.
It's a shock, but it's fun.
But I mean, that's what this is about.
Yeah.
So regardless of what this SOP looks like, et cetera, and how it got there, that's what this is about.
Well, a restaurant is a reflection of the owner. So, you always got to write that in there. And the owner, like Charles said, has got to understand who's working for him. So you don't expect a guy who's been in the country for 6 months to be able to recite a menu like a Shakespearean actor. So you've got to tailor things. Do Vince Lombardi, back to him.
Oh.
The sign of a great leader is getting the most out of what you have. Okay. So if you design that SOP to CYA and at the same time say hello when people walk in, I think you can't go wrong. Guess what, guys and lady? It's that time of the show again. As always, time is our enemy, and this time I won't disappear like last week. And Fred is laughing. So, what I want you all to do is think about that last tidbit of information while I thank our sponsor. Hey, Ed Flanagan and the Error Group. Listen, if you're tired of paying payroll taxes, and who isn't, call Ed Flanagan at the ERA Group, Error Group, ERAgroup.com, and ask him about his IRS 125 cafeteria plan. Yeah, you're paying the money, but a lot of it is being clawed back and put right back into your pocket. You're saving yourself payroll taxes. You're saving your employees tax money. It's a no-brainer, folks. So call Ed at the Error Group. So back to our show. Guys, let's give that one last tidbit of information that when people say, oh, I do have an SOP, give them that tidbit of information that'll get them to go out and look for it right now. Jay, why don't you start?
I think we've said it over and over on this call, but I think SOPs equal consistency equal success. And that's why you need to be on top of your SOPs. You need to be consistently talking about them day to day, week to week with all your staff, That's what makes you successful.
Okay. Richard.
Well, I like that you were referring to the great coach Vince Lombardi and the fact that leadership, Charles and I had a great mentor who used to say the fish stinks from the head first. And the fact of the matter is that's true. And if you were to think about some of the great ownership groups of the NFL or even in college level or any organization, it does start with ownership. It starts with leadership and creation of those things and understanding that it does make a difference in terms of who's at the head and it moves all the way through the organization and be able to get those things communicated, but lead by example. Those are old adages, expect what you expect. But I do think that truth is, the fish does stink from the head first. And if you stink as a leader and you're not having a good day, or you don't feel good, or you're in a bad mood, stay home, or at least get your game face on because you're going to affect everything that's going on, whether it be you as the owner, the general manager, the chef, etc., even the lead server or lead bartender. All that stuff makes a difference because in the end, it really is all about the guest experience and making sure that the guest experience is consistently executed and met to a level that is not just satisfactory, but above. And the SOPs that get created and executed matter through the leadership.
Okay. Charles.
Jay used a word that we've used a lot this morning, and that's consistency. I don't know that any of us that consult have ever done an operational project where the client has not said to us, we have a consistency problem. Or if the client doesn't know it, we found that lack of consistency ourselves. And the fact is that SOPs have the ability, not necessarily to fix the problem, but to be one of the sources to help fix the problem. If you don't start trying to train your employees, to educate your employees, you will have that lack of consistency. It's a reality factor. It's human nature. It doesn't really matter what we're talking about, as we've spoken earlier on the call, whether we're talking about the size of the steak being cut, the loyalty program points, anything, there will be an inconsistency. And if there's one thing that will drive customers away, regardless of the segment of the hospitality industry, it's inconsistency.
Okay. Shauna, unmute yourself. What have you heard today?
Yeah, I'm honestly, I'm loving this conversation. And I think for me, it's really respect that I would like to add to this, because if I don't respect my staff doesn't respect me. Fundamentally, it's a cycle. So it comes, like somebody said, from the very top, which I love because I so agree with that. And then from the top, it goes down to the staff, and from the staff, it goes to our guests. And so I feel like when we respect each other and when we understand that we all are just human beings and we all have a bad day from time to time, but we have respect for each other and grace, and we act professionally by taking our staff to the side. And somebody said, which I love, you praise in public and you punish in private. I loved it so much that I literally had to write it down. And I could not agree more with that, because it's all about us as human beings. We all have a job to do. And fundamentally, it's really all about our guests. And so creating that space, creating that memorable feeling, that warm, welcoming, fuzzy feeling, that is hospitality after all in general. And I think when we as leaders can translate that to our staff by also being warm and hospitable to them, I think it's easier for them to be like, you know what, I don't know how to do that, but because you're so kind to me, I want to be kind back. And so that's just what I would love to add to the conversation. And I'm loving every single point.
Okay, Fred.
Thank you guys. Great panel. I go back to with out of control minimum wage, out of control cost of benefits, and a pool of immigrants that doesn't exist anymore, basically. The people, you better do a great job with the people that work with you and for you. And you better love them and nurture them and grow them, because it ain't easy to replace them anymore. So I think this is all part and parcel of that conversation.
Yes, yes, yes. So, let's look at our restaurant staff the same way Denzel Washington said it in the movie Philadelphia. Explain it to me like I'm a 4-year-old. All right. So, the first coloring book you ever gave one of your kids, did they stay within the lines? No. But you have to draw those lines as a goal to reach. And as they get older and as they color more and more of the color stays within the lines. Now, if you don't draw those lines to start off with, it's a big blob. And the last thing you want is your business to be a gigantic, big, multicolored blob. So draw those lines, change them as the laws change, teach them constantly, get them drawn until everything's within the line, or at least close, and you'll have a successful staff. All right, everybody, I'm going to be back again next week. And I only have 2 things to say. Everyone, stay positive, test negative, and I'll see you all next week. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.